So I've got the May that is currently being fed by a Pi 2 AES on I2S. That's feeding the Holo Serene preamplifier. That is then feeding the AHP2, which is powering the Hi-Fi Man Susvara. This cable, by the way, is made by Viking Weave Audio Cables, aka Skedra. It is so soft. His cables are amazing. Link in the description to his stuff. So, the first thing that you notice when you listen to a May for the first time is the separation. What is separation? Separation is, overall, how well can you pick on one element in the mix and focus just on that. With no effort, with nothing else getting in the way, no matter what else is going on in the track, you can focus on just the guitar, just the vocalist, just the drums, or drum even, and have every last detail presented to you without the track sounding busy, no matter what else is going on in the track. How well can you focus on just one thing? Now, this isn't something which just the May is good at, and I'm going to be comparing the May to the Chord Dave quite a bit in this review for two reasons. One is that I think the Chord Dave is a fantastic DAC. Chord DACs in general also are really, really good in terms of separation, so it's an apt point here. But it's also because, as well as just being a great high-end DAC, it's a popular one. It's a popular one, which means a lot of people are going to have tried it, so it's a good reference point. And even if you haven't tried one, Chord has a lot of dealers, so you can go and try one without having to buy one. I had the Dave and M scaler here, and I've got a review of those up. It's a fantastic product. But whilst I had them here, and I love them, as soon as the review was done, I kind of just didn't listen to them all that much. Because this was better, and I'm going to talk about why. So, separation. The Chord Cutest. It's a fantastic DAC, and one of the things it does really, really well, especially for the price, is separation. But the problem was that everything was very much a kind of left-right presentation. There wasn't much lateral variation and a 3D positioning effect going on. The Dave fixed that. It staged everything much more. There was a lot more layering going on, whereas the Cutest, it was a little bit polite. It was very detailed, but it was kind of flat in terms of how it presented things in a spatial sense. This is Stronger by Siamese, and this has quite a lot of stuff going on. With this, the May, it's absolutely effortless to just pick one thing out and have nothing else get in the way. It's absolutely fantastic. And that's not just the case on the May. That was the same on the Dave and on the Cutest. What the Dave did better than the Cutest, with this track in particular, was that it, again, staged things. Everything had a bit more of a 3D layering effect going on. What the May does, though, is it turns that up to 11 and it adds this visceral, authoritative positioning within that stage. A good track to demonstrate this is It's a Hard Life by Queen. The second verse, when Freddie Mercury starts singing, well, let's play it first.
I know this is a tricky situation. I've only got myself to blame.
On a Dave, this sounds wonderful. It sounds fantastic. The piano's over here, and there's all sorts of resolution, and the vocalist, Freddie Mercury, is all the way over there. It sounds beautiful. It sounds fantastic. But on the May, it doesn't sound like that. Freddie Mercury's just there. It's the most realistic presentation I have heard in a spatial sense of any DAC, of anything I've tried. And this is what I love so much about the May. This is its biggest strength, is its immensely convincing 3D positioning. It's not about the size of stage. It has a big stage. In fact, it's slightly bigger than the Dave, not by a huge amount, but just a touch. It's about how it uses that stage. It's about how convincingly, realistically, and authoritatively it positions things within that stage. On this track, on a Dave, Freddie Mercury's over there, and it sounds great. It's loads of resolution, loads of staging, loads of space, separation. It's great. But on a May, Freddie Mercury's just here. He's in front of you, 6 feet away, and the whole character and body of his voice is contained within that space. It's absolutely sublime.
Just a simple fact of life. It can happen to anyone. You win, you lose. They say.
Right, so in terms of actual size of staging, let's talk a little bit about that. So let's do Eye for an Eye by Bob Moses. This track sounds huge on a good setup. It's beautiful, absolutely massive. I don't have a Dave right here, but when I did have them side by side on this, the May just edged the Dave out, and it kind of depended on if I was using oversampling or NOS, because the presentation there is just slightly different, and I'll talk about that in a sec. But in terms of actual size of staging, it's massive. It's absolutely huge, and it competes with, if not slightly beats, the Dave and M scaler combo. Before we go any further, actually, I want to say that you should go and watch Ron from New Record Day, his review of the May. I don't normally watch other people's reviews because I like to try things without any kind of idea of what to expect. I want to form my own opinions. I watched his review, though, before I actually started making videos myself, and his review is excellent. I will link to it in the description, and I will remind you at the end of this video to go and watch it, so don't click off just yet. And the reason that I'm calling it out is because his video has some of the best and most apt visual descriptions and analogies that I've seen. It gives a really, really good picture of what I'm hearing. And I don't just want to copy what he said, and I don't want to try and take credit for it, because he's got some really, really good descriptions. So after this, I would strongly recommend that you go and watch his video. It describes what I'm hearing very, very well. So let's talk a little bit about detail retrieval itself then. Detail retrieval and resolution. Firstly, I want to be clear that realistically at this level of DAC, detail retrieval itself is not the determining factor that you should be looking for. Most DACs above a certain point are going to be exceptionally resolving, and in almost all situations the bottleneck is going to be the track itself, not the DAC. The DACs are going to vary a lot more in terms of other things like spatial presentation, overall signature, not how resolving they are. But this is a really resolving DAC. And if that's what you're looking for, and that is important to you, then this has got it. When I had the Dave and M scaler here, side by side with the May won just. And there is some objective backing to that, which I'll show you after this track. This is Motherboard by Daft Punk, and this is a fantastic test track overall. It's got all sorts of stuff going on. String instruments, wind, synthetic stuff, lots of macro and microdynamics. The staging and layering, it's a beautiful recording, and it's excellent for testing any kind of high fidelity setup. Sounds wonderful, absolutely beautiful, and the resolution that this can present is fantastic. One of the criticisms that Rob Watts of Chord, who I respect a lot, he's got some absolutely fantastic ideas, and stuff like the pulse array is quite frankly genius. One of the things that he said he didn't like about R2R DACs in the past, and the reason why he didn't like them at all really, is that they didn't handle low-level signals well. And that was true. It used to be the case that R2R DACs almost exclusively had poor THD performance and poor dynamic range. That's not the case anymore. On the left of the screen, you can see the -90 dB sine wave output from a Chord Dave. Now this is intended to be a very low-level signal to test how a DAC performs with, well, low-level signals. And at this level, with 16-bit data, there are 3 potential values. So that's why you can see there are 3 steps, and there's some noise going on, but for the most part, it's doing a really good job. But then on the right is the May. And as you can see, it's pretty clean, to the point where John Atkinson of Stereophile then did one with a 24-bit test file, and it was practically perfect. This objectively handles low-level signals better than a Chord Dave, and that also shows in the 140 dB dynamic range measurement, which is fantastic. Objectively, this DAC is absolutely incredible, and subjectively, it's stunning. But I don't care about the detail retrieval when I'm listening to this. That's not what's impressive. The detail's great, it's nice to have, same as on any DAC. But what's so impressive is how real it sounds. It's the realism, how convincing it is. That's what gets me. And it's to the point where I got 30 minutes into owning this before I cried. I'm not ashamed to admit that. Not much gear makes me do that. But this has on several occasions, because this just sounds so real, and at the risk of sounding really soppy, this gets me the closest connection to my music of anything I've tried, and I absolutely adore that. That is why I love this. It's not because it's detailed, it's not because it's got big staging or something, it's because it just sounds right. And that also makes it quite tricky to review, because how do you describe when something's not missing? When something just sounds correct? When you play something, and as long as the track is recorded excellently, it just sounds real. When Freddie Mercury sounds like he's there, when you can hear, at 20 or so seconds in this track, there's some strings. you can hear where they are positioned. It's not just a group of strings. You can hear each one. It's incredible. That's the only word. It's incredible. It's beautiful. It's so convincing. Convincing and right are the two adjectives that best describe this DAC. And for those reasons, I adore it. This is incredibly resolving. It stages beautifully, but it's the realism that gets me. But sometimes you don't want things to sound realistic. You don't want the resolution. You want the speed and engagement and slam, macrodynamics and engagement. So does it give you that? Yes. Yes, it does. Even if you're not listening to acoustic music at all, this is an extremely fast, extremely textured and refined sounding DAC, and it punches when you ask it to. So this, for example, is The Outside by 21 Pilots. This is pretty good. Yeah, this is super fun. It's Bifrost 2 or more levels of slam when you want it, but with all of the refinement, texture, separation, and what I can only describe as accuracy for everything else. It doesn't feel like it's coloring things. And to be clear, I've not tried a Dangerous Convert 2, which has got a bit of a reputation for being a slam king. I don't know if it's that level. But some might say that maybe that's a little too over the top, which is great for some music. I mean, Bifrost 2 is not a neutral sounding DAC, but I really, really liked it. It was great fun for certain genres. This just works with everything. Everything you throw at this sounds so fucking good. And I love it. I absolutely love it. Every single genre, every single track, everything I can put this through. And it's pairings as well. It just seems to work with everything. It's not like you need to pick a warm amp or need to pick a clinical sounding amp to kind of compensate for some of the characteristics here, because it just sounds right. It just sounds good, correct. And these are horribly vague descriptions. But again, it's so hard to describe what is not missing. This is the best sounding DAC I have tried, and it's not even that close to the second best. This is fantastic. So, you're wanting a May, do you get a Kitsune tuned edition or do you get a level 2? I wouldn't recommend getting the level 1, and the reason for that is that level 2 you get the upgraded USB module, and that is good. That is definitely worth the money, and the level 1 to level 2 jump is not too big. Level 2 to KTE though, is that worth it? And what is the difference? Well, I've spent quite a bit of time just A-Bing the two, just having them connected to the Serene, switching back and forth, both balanced, both exactly the same, nothing changed, both same transport even, and there is a slight difference. The KTE is just 2% snappier. That's it. For most acoustic music, for classical, everything else is the same. Resolution, staging, positioning, timbre, it's all exactly the same, but the KTE is just for stuff like drums, electronic music in particular, just a little bit quicker. That's it. It's like 2%. It's not night and day, and you do, if I just had one, I would not be able to listen to it and go, oh, that's the KTE. I have to have them side by side, and it's close. It's really close, but they are slightly different. Is that worth $800 as an upgrade? That depends, because for me, I don't think I would pay $800 outright. But then for the kind of person who was looking at spending 10 grand on a Dave, or 15 grand for Dave and M Scaler, what's $800 when you're still saving 5 or 10 grand and getting something better anyway? Why wouldn't you just get the best? So it kind of depends on you. Realistically, if the $800 is not a big deal to you, get the KTE. It is better, slightly. It's not a value-based improvement. And if you are saving to get this DAC, I wouldn't. But if you are comfortably buying this DAC, the KTE might be worth it. So I've talked quite a lot about how this DAC sounds, and for the most part those impressions span over however you're going to use this DAC. But you can change the sound slightly and just tweak things by using it in a few different ways. I mostly use it in NOS, non-oversampling. I love how NOS sounds on this, even though I don't like it on some other DACs. Denafrips DACs, so this is an interesting one. I've got a review coming up for the Ares 2. Turns out that Denafrips NOS isn't NOS at all. It's linear oversampling. It's just linear interpolation. I will discuss that more in the Aries 2 video, but yeah, Denafrip's NOS is not NOS. This is actual NOS, and it sounds fantastic. What changes when you go from non-oversampling to internal? Okay, actually, I'm just going to say that you probably shouldn't use the internal oversampling. The internal oversampling is fine, that's it. But when you buy a $5 grand DAC, you don't want fine, you want fantastic. And it doesn't quite give you fantastic. What does give you fantastic is NOS or HQPlayer. Now, HQPlayer is a software which allows you to do extremely high performance oversampling on your PC. It's got integration with Roon, so you can literally just add it as an output device. And HQPlayer has, so for example, if you're a chord fan, the M scaler has million taps. HQPlayer has filters up to 16 million taps, and you can do 15th order noise shaping. You can do output sample rates up to 1.536 megahertz into the May. So, for example, I've got it configured to my favorite filter, which is Sync MX at 1.536 megahertz, which is 4 million taps, and it sounds fantastic. Let's do Karma Police again, and we'll play it on the May. Now, there'll be a little bit of a processing delay, but it's worth it. Yeah, the processing delay is a little bit of a bottleneck. It doesn't interfere with gapless playback. If you play a track and let it go on to the next one, it does so seamlessly. It's just when you skip or something, because it's a 4 million tap filter, it takes a while. So that's kind of a bummer, but it sounds so good. What benefits do you get by doing this? Well, exactly the same thing as adding an M scaler, but more of it, basically. You get even bigger staging, macro dynamics get snappier, separation just gets turned up to 50. It's just basically an all-round improvement, other than, interestingly, timbre. And I'm hesitant to say that it's because it improves timbre, and more just that... Well, there's evidence to say that human hearing beats the Fourier uncertainty principle, which is kind of nuts to begin with. There isn't enough evidence to say how exactly oversampling impacts human perception. There just isn't. There's not that much study on it. Personally, I find that this oversampling makes it sound slightly more detailed, a little bit better clarity, air, separation, and staging, but timbre and realism suffers slightly, even though that might sound kind of contrary to the other improvements. Basically, it suits different music. And that's nice. It's not that either of them sound bad. Both of them are doing most things better than most other DACs. It's phenomenal. But it's nice to be able to tune your sound slightly by using it in different ways. So, what about DSD? Well, DSD is an interesting one, because the thing with DSD is that it is already 1-bit information. It has already been modulated, and that means that the modulator in your Delta Sigma DAC is no longer a factor. In fact, if you look at the block diagram for the an AKM chip, for example, you can see that DSD literally just bypasses half the DAC. It just goes straight to the output stage. Because DSD is PDM. At its most basic, you could slap a capacitor on the end of a USB cable, and the result would be the analog waveform. And so as a result, the quality aspect has been lifted off your DAC in large part, not entirely. Obviously, the power supply, jitter, and all that, and the output stage is going to make a difference, but the actual DAC itself plays a lot less of a part than if you're just playing PCM. If you have a true DSD converter, if you have a genuine 1-bit DSD converter, which a lot of DACs don't. No ESS DACs convert DSD natively. All of it goes through their hyperstream modulator, all of it gets resampled. Denafrip's and Rockner DACs, the R2R ones, they don't convert DSD natively either. They convert it to PCM and then play it on the R2R ladder. But Holo doesn't do that, because that's not good enough. They have an R2R ladder, and then for DSD, they have a true 1-bit converter. So when I play Street of Dreams on Embrace Me, it sounds wonderful. It's just, yeah, this sounds fantastic because this is a fantastic recording, but the fact that this is a true DSD converter is what's allowing it to do that. If you play it on an ESS DAC or something like an ADI2 with DSD Direct turned off, it sounds a hell of a lot worse than with DSD Direct turned on, and To be clear, just because the DAC is playing less of a part with DSD, which I'll do a video at some point explaining the difference between DSD and PCM, it still plays a part. The output stage being fully Class A and wonderful and measuring amazing, and the power supply and the jitter, that's still important. And it still sounds better, a lot better, coming out of the May than it does the ADI2. But the gap between that and insert other DAC here with true DSD support is smaller than when you're playing PCM, just inherently because of how DSD works. You can actually use this trick with HQPlayer to get wonderful performance out of lower-end DACs by using HQPlayer's DSD modulators to effectively replace the modulator in your DAC. You need a lot of CPU horsepower to do that, but that's kind of a fun thing you can try. Anyway, I'm getting off topic, but what I'm saying is this is wonderful. You can use this in so many different ways to tune your sound slightly, and I'm deliberately not going into it too much because I don't want to make this review too confusing. I'm going to leave my impressions that I've already given as they are because they are accurate to just about everything. The differences in how presentation is given, depending on how you use this DAC, are a lot smaller. And if you get one of these, then you should play with those and try them out for yourself. Because what you like best might not be what I like best. You might like using this with internal oversampling. You might like a different HQPlayer filter. You might just prefer NOS straight away. And you should try all those things. No matter how you use it, though, this sounds phenomenal. The realism, the speed, the separation, the just visceral timbre, and just, I can't put it into words how realistic the positioning within the stage is. It's unlike anything else I've heard, and I love it. I love it. That's the best thing about this DAC, is how amazingly, convincingly it gives spatial presentation. So, in summary then, this is the best DAC I've heard. This is $5,000. It's the most realistic, most resolving, authoritative, convincing sounding DAC I have heard, and it's worth every penny. I don't really understand why this isn't more than $10,000, because this is blowing stuff like the M-Scaler and Dave away. I don't want to sound like I'm sensationalizing things, but it's really not even all that close. This is wonderful. If you get a chance to listen to one of these, do yourself a favor, go and listen to it. Just make sure that you've got your wallet prepared, because I promise you'll probably end up wanting one. I hope you enjoyed that video. If you have any specific questions you'd like to ask me, then feel free to join my Discord, or if you're a Patreon supporter, message me in the private Telegram chat. At the moment, all Patreon support is going towards acquiring an audio precision analyzer, which will allow for making of much more in-depth content and testing of devices which I'm reviewing. Thank you so much to everyone who is supporting me, especially my Diamond and Legend tier supporters: Chris, CK Yozizawa Zoo, Daniel Mellinger, Jithan the Shiba, Lossless British Accent, Ross Kyle, Woland Gravitas, Naivotsu, Bean Bowawito, Daniel Hybiak, Jeremy Zagorski, King Jong-un, Commodus, Lana Bennett, Ladeja, Luxifer, and Pokey. You guys are fantastic. To everyone else, I hope you have a fantastic day. See you next time.